In the early 1980s, if you wanted to buy Unix, you didn't call AT&T, you called Microsoft. Yes, that Microsoft. Before Windows, before even MS-DOS became a household name, the company Bill Gates built was, by several accounts, the largest volume seller of Unix licenses on the planet. It sold under a different name, wore different clothes, and ran on machines you've probably never heard of. But it was Unix, distributed further and wider than anything AT&T itself was doing. The name was Xenix, and its story explains a road Microsoft almost took, and the one it eventually didn't. To understand why Microsoft ever touched Unix, you have to understand AT&T's strange position. Unix was born in 1969 at Bell Labs, elegant, portable, and beloved by universities and engineers. But AT&T was a regulated telephone monopoly, bound by a 1956 consent decree that barred it from entering the computer business. It could license Unix's source code to others, almost as an afterthought, but it couldn't package, market, or sell it as a real commercial product. That left a vacuum. The microcomputer world of the late 1970s was exploding with new hardware and no serious multi-user operating system to run on it. Someone was going to fill that gap. AT&T legally couldn't. Others could. Around 1978 and 1979, Microsoft, still a small software outfit best known for basic interpreters, secured a source license for Unix from AT&T. The exact terms are murky. Microsoft rarely publicized the deal, and decades later the details remain pieced together from second-hand accounts. But the strategic logic is clear enough. Microsoft's agreements with hardware makers, including the arrangement that would soon produce MS-DOS for IBM, kept it from selling its own operating systems as multi-user platforms. Unix, meanwhile, looked like the inevitable future of serious business computing. Portable, powerful, and increasingly the standard among universities and workstation vendors. If Microsoft wanted a foothold in that future, licensing Unix was the fastest way in. There was a problem. Microsoft had programmers, but not deep Unix kernel expertise. So it turned to a small Santa Cruz, California outfit called the Santa Cruz Operation, SCO, founded by Larry Doolittle and Doug Michels, which had experience porting Unix to smaller systems. Together they took Unix version 7, AT&T's research release, and adapted it into something new, Xenix. The engineering challenge was substantial. Real Unix had lived on room-sized minicomputers. Xenix had to run on the microprocessors actually reaching desks and small offices, Intel's 8086, Zilog's Z8000, and later Motorola's 68000. Squeezing a multi-user, multitasking operating system onto that hardware, with its tight memory and primitive tooling, was genuinely difficult work, and SCO's engineers did much of the heavy lifting. Here's the twist. You couldn't just walk up and buy Xenix from Microsoft. It was licensed out to hardware makers who bundled it with their machines. Tandy shipped it on TRS-80 and later systems. Alto's computer systems ran it on their business micros. SCO itself sold and supported versions directly. Through this OEM strategy, quietly, without much fanfare or brand recognition, Xenix became arguably the most widely installed Unix variant of the early to mid-1980s. Outpacing AT&T's own official releases in sheer unit volume, most of the people using it probably never thought of themselves as Unix users at all. They just knew it ran their small business accounting software. Then priorities shifted. The IBM PC, launched in 1981, took off faster and bigger than almost anyone at Microsoft anticipated, and MS-DOS suddenly looked like the company's real future. Not a side project waiting for Unix to mature. Meanwhile, in 1982, the breakup of AT&T's telephone monopoly, finalized a couple of years later, freed AT&T from the old consent decree. Suddenly, AT&T could sell Unix itself commercially, aggressively under its own System V branding. Microsoft's original opening, the gap AT&T legally couldn't fill, was closing. Through the mid-1980s, Microsoft gradually transferred its Xenix ownership and development to SCO, selling off stakes and rights in stages, until by 1987 it had fully divested, leaving SCO as sole steward of the operating system Microsoft had helped create. SCO carried Xenix legacy forward, eventually folding it into SCO Unixware and its broader Unix business through the 1990s, a lineage that would later tangle itself into some of the most notorious lawsuits in software history. And Microsoft's relationship with Unix would curdle over time. By the 1990s, building Windows NT, Microsoft treated Unix less as an ancestor and more as a rival to be dethroned in corporate data centers. Yet, the irony holds. Long before Windows dominated business computing, Microsoft's first real bet on that market was Unix, wearing a different name. Xenix is barely remembered today, a footnote squeezed between BASIC and DOS. But it's worth remembering that the empire built on Windows started in part by quietly becoming the world's biggest Unix distributor.